The town of Ravenbrook had always been one of those quiet communities where everyone knew everyone and the doors were rarely locked at night. Located in the middle of a dense forest, the city seemed isolated from the rest of the world. However, Ravenbrook's tranquility was just a facade, an illusion that hid dark secrets. At Ravenbrook Police Station, Officer David Mitchell was on duty that dark, rainy night. The old building, with its solid brick walls, seemed like a safe haven from the storm raging outside. David, a middle-aged man with graying hair and tired eyes, was immersed in a book as rain beat against the windows. The police radio crackled and the voice of Officer Jenkins, his colleague, broke through the silence of the night. Jenkins was patrolling the area near Ravenwood Forest, an area known for its stories of strange apparitions and phenomena. In his voice, David could hear the panic and desperation. "David, I need help. I'm near Ravenwood Forest. Something is wrong here. Please come quickly," shouted Jenkins over the radio. David picked up his radio and responded immediately, promising he was on his way. He knew that Ravenwood Forest was a dark place, especially at night, and he couldn't leave his colleague in danger. He threw his book aside, grabbed his jacket, and ran out of the police station. The rain continued to fall, drenching him as he headed into the forest. The wind howled in the trees, creating a symphony of disturbing sounds. David knew time was against him, and his heart was pounding as he approached the place where Jenkins had called for help. When he finally arrived at the scene, he found Jenkins' patrol car empty and abandoned on the side of the road. The red light flashed on top of the police car, creating an ominous scene in the darkness. David felt a shiver run down his spine, but he was determined to find his colleague. He began searching the area, calling Jenkins' name, but got no response. The only thing he heard was the sound of the rain hitting the leaves and the wind whispering through the trees. As he advanced through the dark forest, a feeling that something was wrong consumed him. It was then that he saw a faint light between the trees. He approached cautiously and found Jenkins' flashlight lying on the ground, its light still on. The flashlight was pointing in a specific direction, as if Jenkins had left a clue. David followed the light of the flashlight, his heart pounding in his chest. The forest seemed closed around him, as if he was watching and waiting. With each step, the environment became more ominous, and David knew he was entering unknown territory. As he followed the trail of light, a feeling that something was wrong continued to grow within him. He felt as if he were being watched, as if invisible eyes were fixed on him. The darkness of the forest was oppressive, and the atmosphere was filled with a fear he couldn't explain. He continued his search, not knowing what awaited him ahead. Jenkins was his colleague, his friend, and he was determined to find him and bring him back safely. The mystery of Ravenwood Forest was just beginning to unfold. David continued to follow the trail of light from Jenkins' flashlight through the dense forest. The tall trees created a sort of shadowy roof, and the incessant rain added an element of gloom to the landscape. As he advanced, a feeling of uneasiness intensified, as if something was waiting for him in the shadows. After a few minutes, he arrived at a small clearing in the heart of the forest. The moonlight cast a faint glow over the place, revealing a disturbing scene. Jenkins' tent was fallen, torn in several places, as if it had been violently attacked. David approached the tent carefully and examined the interior. It was in complete disarray, with personal belongings scattered across the muddy floor. It looked like there was a fight there, but there was no sign of his colleague. The feeling that something was very wrong only increased when he saw drag marks on the ground, leading out of the clearing and deeper into the forest. The marks were deep, as if someone had been dragged away by force. With a lump in his throat, David followed the drag marks, his flashlight lighting the way. Each step took him deeper into the forest, where the darkness was thicker and the silence more oppressive. Only the sound of rain persisted, pounding like a drum in his ears. As he walked forward, he began to hear whispers in the darkness. They were soft, unintelligible voices, as if they were phantom whispers. David turned his head quickly, trying to locate the source of the sounds, but all he saw were shadows moving through the trees. The voices continued, whispering indistinct words that seemed echo in your mind. He felt like they were messing with his thoughts, like the shadows were trying to get into his head. With each step, the feeling of being watched and pursued grew. Finally, he arrived at another clearing, In the center, a large, gnarled tree stood, and in it stood Jenkins, tied with thick ropes. His face was pale and contorted in terror, and his empty eyes stared into space. "Jenkins!" David shouted, running towards his colleague. He tried to free him, but when he touched the ropes, something made him flinch. The shadows in the clearing began to writhe and reach toward them, as if they had a life of their own. David grabbed his flashlight and tried to chase away the shadows, but they seemed to resist the light. It was as if the forest were alive, as if the shadows were part of it. Jenkins continued to mumble incoherent words, and his condition worsened by the second. The situation was out of control. David knew he was facing something beyond his understanding, something that defied all laws of nature. The forest of Ravenwood hid dark secrets, and he was about to discover them in the most terrifying way possible. David found himself cornered in the clearing, facing the ominous shadows that seemed to writhe and reach toward him. Jenkins was still tied to the tree, muttering incoherent words and shaking with terror. The forest was alive with otherworldly energy, and David knew he was looking at something beyond human comprehension. Determined to save his colleague and himself, David grabbed the flashlight and shined it into the shadows. Lights danced in the trees and seemed to repel the shadows temporarily, but they soon returned. It was as if the forest was protecting its secret tooth and nail. Jenkins continued to mumble, his words becoming more and more unintelligible. David was getting desperate. He tried to cut the ropes tying Jenkins to the tree with his knife, but the shadows seemed to stop him, as if they didn't want their colleague to be freed. It was then that David had a desperate idea. He lit a makeshift fire with twigs and dry leaves he'd found in the clearing. The flames danced, casting a warm, golden light around him. The shadows retreated before the fire, as if they feared the light. With the help of the bonfire, David was finally able to free Jenkins. His colleague was visibly shaken and disoriented, but was alive. They knew they couldn't stay in that clearing for long, as the lurking shadows were still around. David helped Jenkins to his feet, and they began to back away slowly, keeping the light of the lantern and fire burning. The shadows seemed reluctant to face the light and kept a safe distance. As they walked out of the forest, David wondered what they had witnessed that night. He knew that the city of Ravenbrook held dark secrets that were beyond human understanding. Jenkins was too terrified to talk about what had happened, but they knew that this encounter with the supernatural would scar their minds forever. They finally emerged from the forest and returned to the city, where the rain continued to fall. David knew that the night had changed everything. The sleepy town of Ravenbrook would never be the same, and he was determined to unravel the mysteries that surrounded it, even if it led him to face the unknown once again. David and Jenkins finally emerged from the forest, panting and drenched from the relentless rain. The dark environment of the Ravenwood forest was behind them, but the marks of that terrifying night would remain with them forever. When they arrived at Ravenbrook Police Station, they were greeted with looks of surprise and concern from the other officers. David knew he needed to report what they had witnessed, even if it seemed unbelievable. Gathering his courage, he described the vivid shadows, the disturbing whispers, and the terror they had faced in the forest. Jenkins, still shaken, corroborated the story with a nod. They knew they were not alone in this terrifying experience. The other officers listened in silence, and a gloomy atmosphere hung over the police station. Some of them began to murmur about ancient stories of strange apparitions and phenomena in the Ravenwood forest. It seemed that the city held dark secrets that were now beginning to reveal themselves. David was determined not to let the shadows and mysteries of the forest win. He convinced his colleagues to investigate further and explore the city's ancient stories. Perhaps, together, they could discover the truth behind the terror they had faced. As their investigations progressed, they discovered that Ravenwood Forest was filled with legends and stories of mysterious disappearances over the years. Locals believed the forest was cursed and harbored a dark presence that protected an ancient and dangerous secret. David and his colleagues decided to organize night expeditions into the forest, equipped with flashlights, cameras, and measuring instruments. They wanted to document any paranormal activity and find answers to the mysteries that haunted the city. As the expeditions continued, they captured disturbing images and recordings. Independently moving shadows, whispering voices, and unexplained phenomena became commonplace. The forest of Ravenwood seemed to react to his investigations, as if it were protecting its secrets more strongly than ever. During one of the expeditions, they discovered a clearing in the heart of the forest, similar to the one where Jenkins had been found. There, they found ancient symbols carved into trees and mysterious artifacts buried in the ground. It seemed that the forest was the setting for ancient rituals and dark practices that went back centuries. As they explored the clearing, the shadows began to writhe around them, as if they were gathering for one last confrontation. The feeling of being watched and followed was back, but the police did not back down. Determined to unravel the mystery of Ravenwood, they decided to face the shadows head-on. They used their flashlights and the lights from the measuring equipment to create a circle of light, pushing the shadows away. That's when it happened. The shadows retreated as if they had been defeated, and a sense of peace spread across the clearing. The police officers looked around, perplexed, and realized that they had won the battle against the supernatural. They understood that the forest of Ravenwood hid dark, ancient secrets, but also that the light of truth and determination could drive away the most terrible shadows. The town of Ravenbrook would never be the same, but now, at least they knew they were one step closer to unraveling the mysteries that surrounded it. The story of that terrifying night in Ravenwood Forest has become a local legend, a reminder that the unknown can be terrifying, but also that courage and determination can face the greatest terrors. And so, the town of Ravenbrook continued, guarding its dark secrets beneath the light of the moon and the shadow of the forest.